Hello, good evening, and welcome back to the State of Scottish Football here on the Estate of Mind Network. We're currently live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, anywhere you can get video content. We're probably going to be there, and we have a lot of games to dissect this weekend. Quite a lot happened as well, and a few shockers along the way. But luckily, I'm not alone to discuss them. To my right, as you look at it, we've got David Smith. David, how you doing?
Very well, Stuart. I hope you're well.
I'm not bad at all, and as well, we've got Glenn Schroeder. Glenn, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you, Stu, and pleasure to be alongside yourself and Dave again today on a Monday to dissect the weekend's action.
Definitely. Well, we'll start with the top of the table clash, to be honest, which saw Rangers versus Hearts coming away with a 1-1 scoreline, Hearts equalising in the 93rd minute after all. It was a pretty interesting contest. David, was this Rangers' best performance all season? Because although they came away with a draw, a lot of people were saying that the way they played in the first half was better than they've seen and reminiscent of last season.
It's actually funny because Rangers, it probably was their best performance this season. When you look at it, they've played poor in games, but won games and won games, but not playing comfortable or not playing pretty, but they've got the job done. Whilst on Saturday against Hearts, they were poor. Sorry, they were very good. Sorry, and picked up a 1-1 draw against Hearts. And fair credit to Hearts because they showed a lot of character to come back and get the draw on Saturday. It just shows where Hearts are at just now because probably a year or two ago, or 2-3 years ago, they'd have probably struggled to get a result at Ibrox against a Rangers side, or especially a Rangers side now. But it just shows where Hearts are at just now. But from the Rangers, it's 2 points dropped and an opportunity missed.
Glenn, do you think this kind of puts Rangers back on track if they ever were really off the track? I mean, we've seen, as David said, this season, they've not played well, but they have been able to get results. But now they're starting to play well in games. I mean, ironically, they didn't actually get the result at the weekend, but throughout the 90 minutes, they looked like the side who walked away with it last year.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting he says that then back on track. I think if there's Rangers fans tuning in tonight, they'll probably think they've maybe gone a bit off track, when you look at the result and where it leaves them when other teams around them, looking at Celtic in particular, have picked up a win. But, at the end of the day, they've not lost the game. So they've got to view that, and they've kept the closest team to them in Hearts at an arm's length. They've not lost any ground. But I think from a Rangers point of view, what will impress them most is what you're absolutely right in saying is they've showed signs of how they steamrolled the league last season, and on another day they could have quite comfortably scored 3 or 4 against Hearts. It just the luck wasn't on their side on Saturday.
David, John Lundstrom got Rangers' goal earlier on in this game, and he's a player who's faced a lot of criticism since coming up from England on a free transfer from Sheffield United, and I think the criticism has been justified. I think he's been poor, but he's started to look a little bit better. He's come up with a few goals now. Is he finally becoming the player that a lot of Rangers fans thought they were getting?
Yeah, I think the problem was the system. If I'm going to be honest with you, it wasn't John Lundstrom individually. I think it was more the system within the team, because I see it myself when Rangers were playing Dundee that Lundstrom had a really good game that day. And to be honest, I couldn't really understand where the criticism was coming from. I can understand it in stages, but having seen him firsthand, I can maybe look at it in a different way. But I mean, he's going to be a pivotal player for Rangers this season. There's no question about that, and he showed that on Saturday. I mean, if he doesn't score that goal, I think Hearts going to pick up all 3 points. Because I mean, as much as Rangers deserved at least a point out of the game, there was also stages in that game where they looked in the back burner, and Hearts did pose a threat, not too much of a threat, but they posed a threat. And it's maybe a sign of where Rangers are just now, because they played brilliantly on Saturday, but if you ask Steven Gerrard, I'm pretty sure he'll say it's 2 points drop, but it's a good point all the same, because I mean, when you look at it from a Rangers point of view, it's a good point, but you look at that against Hearts at home, we're thinking they should be picking up all 3 points, but John Lundstrom had a good game at the weekend, and he'll be hoping to continue his fine form.
Glenn, it's interesting that Alan McGregor was at fault for the goal, because in recent times he's been Mr. Reliable for Rangers, and although he turns 40 next year, he's still an absolutely outstanding goalkeeper. But this season, obviously, we've seen John McLaughlin get a few games in the league. Was it surprising to you to see Alan McGregor make that kind of mistake? Because what we're understanding from a neutral point of view is that McGregor's being saved for the bigger games, and that's why McLaughlin has come in. And then in the big game, Alan McGregor's made an error like that.
Yeah, it was a strange one. I didn't understand why the decision was made, but it's a good explanation you've given on the situation. But it's uncharacteristic of Alan McGregor. We saw last season some of the saves he pulled off, And I think in this game, both goals, really, the keepers will have, question marks around their own performances on it. I think Craig Gordon could probably do better in terms of saving Lundstrom's shot. He gets a hand to it, but that's not the mistake at the time of the game you expect someone as experienced as Alan McGregor to be making, and he's cost them 2 points and handed Hearts an absolute vital point in their excellent start to the season. And I suppose Gerrard will be hoping, with the European game coming up this week, if he's going to stick with McGregor, he can just get that mistake out of his mind, because it's a big game on Thursday that they've got coming up, given their poor start in Europe.
I think you make a really good point there about the two keepers, because you could argue that the two best keepers in the Premiership were featuring, and both of them probably should have done better as well. It's almost ironic in that sense. But we'll move over to Hearts here. David, Hearts are still unbeaten in the season so far, and now they've played their rivals Hibs, they've played Aberdeen, Celtic, Rangers, the top four from last season. How impressive have they been? We're only 8 games into the season, but Hearts are genuine title contenders as things stand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to pinpoint initially back to 2005, and I was actually reading the Times on my way to Edinburgh Saturday. I'm a bit posh, so apologies for that. But I was reading the Times, and there's a really good piece in there with regards to, they interviewed Stephen Pesley, Paul Hartley, John McGlynn about 2005 and the catastrophe that happened about 2005, and the fact that George Belly took over and all that to carry on with Vladimir Romanov. And you just think what could have happened had that situation not had arose. But I don't think the Hearts side now replicates the 2005-2006 Hearts side, but there's a difference about this Hearts side this season, where they have a mentality. They were rightly criticised last season because they weren't exactly playing fantastic competitive football, despite being in the Championship. Robbie Nelson's worked in a system during the course season to play more attacking football, but also keep his stability at the back. And it's helped massively to get results for Hearts. With the exception of that draw at Ibrox and Saturday, I think the only ever draw they picked up was in the end of a derby when they drew 0-0 with Hibs. So it just tells you everything you need to know. And Craig Gordon offers a lot. Some of the saves you look at and go phenomenal, but for Craig Gordon to never date the office, if you ask me, they've got a lot of good players. They've got a lot of players that offer a lot of physique, a lot of athleticism. I'm on my phone here. I'm trying to get some information for you. Cammy Devlin came out and top for distance covered in this game. He ran 12.6 kilometres across in 90 minutes. Closely followed by midfield partner Benny Baringamy, who ran 12 kilometres. So that just tells you everything you need to know. It tells you that Hearts are a very pacey team, they're a very athletic team, and they're a team that will expose at every opportunity. And Craig Halkett got a good goal in the dying stages of the game to seal what was a good point for Hearts. As I alluded to at the top of the show, this is probably a good point for Hearts. It shows how far they've came, because Hearts would go to Glasgow in recent years and probably not pick up that result, but there's a desire and a want and a feel within that Hearts camp to suggest that they want to go to Glasgow, pick up points, which is refreshing to see.
David, you've set me up perfectly there for the next question to Glenn. Now, going to Ibrox, obviously, it's a difficult ask for any team like that. And Hearts did have fans in this one. First time we've seen in the Premiership fans at an Old Firm side. It was great to see, and you could hear them. They made a difference, and there's been a lot of videos come out from the Hearts Twitter account, showing the celebrations. But has that desire come through from Hearts? The fact that they didn't stop in this game, they knew there was only one goal in it, and at the end, it was fortunate from Alan McGregor, but they did get the goal that many people would argue they deserved. Does that show just how determined this side is? At the beginning, we know they've got quality, we know Robbie Nielsen's a good manager, but they've also got that bit between their teeth to get a result at any cost, really, to grind out a win. Well, a draw on this occasion.
Yeah, no, definitely, because you look at the game against Celtic, I'm sure John Souttar's winning goal was, towards the back end of the game there. So it's kind of a never say die attitude and, fighting for each other, as, Dave points out there with some of the stats he provided. And just it's a different mentality that this Hearts team has got. And I think it's easy to have that when, you're getting the confidence from the results that are following just now. And, they're obviously enjoying being at the right end of the table. And, maybe there is talk amongst the squad about being genuine contenders. And whilst you are up and fighting for that contention, you will fight tooth and nail till the last whistle. And they did that on Saturday and got their deserved point in the end.
David, you mentioned earlier on there about the distance that Cammy Devlin's covered. Just how good have Cammy Devlin and Benny Beningame been together? Because a lot of people are now starting to call them the best midfield pivot in the league, and I think there's evidence to back that up.
Yeah, Cammy Devlin and Benny Beningame are two players that probably go a bit under the radar, if I'm going to be honest with you. We all focus on the players that play for Glasgow too, or players such as Lewis Ferguson, or probably just because he's in the Scotland squad or in the Scotland plans moving forward. So we'll probably go and focus on the players in our native country. We haven't focused on the likes of Devlin and Beningame. Devlin offers a willingness to get forward, whilst Beningame also offers a willingness to get forward, but he does a lot more of the dirty work. Beningame, got that right there. They both offer so much across the park, which has probably helped in terms of getting results for Hearts. And the fact that they're dealing with threats such as on Saturday, such as Aribo and other players in that area, just tells you everything you need to know. And one thing that will probably go under the radar is Joe Aribo. I noticed the challenge that he produced on Saturday. I can argue that's a sending off. I mean, if you're going to send off Ryan Porteous for an instant against Aribo, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I'd argue a case by saying Aribo should be sent off on Saturday.
I was actually just about to end on this fixture on that point there. Glenn, was it a red card for Joe Aribo? I mean, I hate talking about controversy. I do kind of love it in the sense as well, though. But we've seen a few of these instances happen this season. Aribo's gotten away with it here. Well, I say gotten away with it. Not necessarily a red card. In my eyes, I think it was high. If I had to think of an example, it reminds me of when Aaron Wan-Bissaka got sent off for Manchester United in the Champions League a little while ago against Young Boys, where he kind of over the ball and he goes in, studs up, and he connects with the man. And although you can argue, he was going for the ball, etc., it's dangerous at the end of the day. What were your thoughts on the Aribo challenge?
I think it's, I was very adamant that Ryan Porteous was not a red card, and I think if you're taking that as a context for what is a red card, then Joe Aribo's is the exact same. You look at some of the quotes that Gerrard attributed to the Porteous red card about being reckless, out of control. Well, I don't think Aribo was either. He had no control. He was not winning the ball, and the referee's in plain sight. And okay, the referee's booked him, but yeah, it's, I'd love to see if it was, I think, the other way around. I think we all know what colour card would have been shown, but that's just our own thoughts on the refereeing of Scottish football. Definitely.
And of course, Robbie Neilson ended up going to the stands for that game as well. I'm not sure how long the touchline ban will last for him, but it's...
which was a madness decision as well, because Bacuna grabs, I'm not sure who the Hearts player was, but he definitely has his hands around his throat. Yeah, the only red card is to Robbie Neilson, but...
it's definitely strange, to be honest. It seems that every single game, or at least one game a week at the moment, there is a controversial either sending off or not sending off, and it varies between which club it is at the moment. This week, it was Robbie Neilson getting sent off, and Aribo who potentially could have been sent off. But we'll go over to the other side of Glasgow. And David, I'm just going to go straight away here. Was this the perfect weekend for Celtic, given Hibs dropped points, Rangers and Hearts dropped points, Celtic picked up 3 away, back-to-back away wins as well, it has to be said, for Celtic, is a fantastic achievement.
A professional performance, 3 points, and that's all you can ask for, Stuart. I mean, it was fantastic from Celtic. A good 2-0 win against a Motherwell side that have started the season very well, have been fairly impressive. And I mean, it wasn't a vintage performance from Celtic, but I think you would take a 2-0 win against Motherwell, against a side that, as I alluded to, have started the season very well. They did very well. I mean, the first goal was a little bit disappointing from a Motherwell point of view. The ball got into Jota, and Jota, we believe Kelly could cover himself and go on a little bit more, but Jota, good finish all the same, and full credit to him for that. And then Celtic go and kill off the game off with a second, and a good 3 points for Celtic. That serves up Celtic well for tomorrow night's game against Ferencváros in the Europa League, which is obviously getting the bizarre kick-off attached to it, but no, it should be a good game tomorrow night for Celtic, and it's a good 3 points to go alongside that. And it's not been a great start of the season from a Celtic point of view. Let's put that out there. But also, when you take into consideration that they're 4 points off top, despite having the bad start that they've had, it's maybe not all doom and gloom at Celtic. There's a lot of talk, and maybe justifiably so, but the fact that Ange ball isn't working, or isn't working yet. Well, my message would be allow time to process, because, I mean, you're only 4 points off Rangers, your rivals, and there's lots more twists and turns to come in the season yet.
every week I seem to change my mind on Celtic, and one week I think they can't defend, one week I think Ange Ball is absolutely fantastic and Postecoglou's got them playing well, but it's so difficult to make up my mind because they just seem to change week in, week out. But one player who I think I've consistently said is consistent is Jota, who's come in. Glenn, how good of a signing do you think Jota has been? Obviously on loan from Benfica. At first he sort of looked like a player with a lot of flair that couldn't really finish. The end product wasn't quite there, but we've seen in the last couple of games now he's added that, and he's been a real threat for Celtic.
Yeah, a real threat for Celtic, and he kind of stood out in the game at Tawdry alongside Kyogo, who's obviously had all the plaudits from the way he started the season, but it now seems like the plaudits are transferring to the other wing in Jota. And, you know, Colin, who's hosts the Friday show, I had him on my own podcast after that Aberdeen Celtic game, and he said Celtic should be doing all they can, just buy him. They've got the option to buy on that loan deal, and they should be going for that because he's a player whose value is only going to go in one direction, and obviously is now adding to the goals, the goal threat that Celtic possess from midfield, and he can probably throw in a few assists later on when Celtic actually finally get a dedicated striker that can, you know, hit the ground running as well. But yeah, I wasn't really convinced about if his flair would add up in Scottish football, but he's proven everybody wrong so far.
Definitely. I think he's always an interesting one as well. The fact that when he came and he spoke about how he's got a Celtic shirt from the past and it's a club who he's had a lot of admiration for, and a lot of people said, you know, he's just saying that because he signed, but he does seem to be pretty passionate about it, to be honest. It's been a very interesting signing. And David, just as a whole, Postecoglou's signings, I wouldn't say have been hit and miss, but they're quite hard to make up your mind on whether they've been effective or not. And Glenn touched on Kyogo there. Do you think the attackers that he signed, we've seen Lila Bada come in, we've seen Kyogo and we've seen Jota, that's potentially the front trident that Celtic could get away with. Do you think those have been really effective from Postecoglou, who perhaps deserves a little bit more credit for the signings?
Now, yes. If you asked me that question a month ago, I'd probably have disagreed and said no. I think we're seeing the true complexity behind, first and foremost, what Kyogo Furuhashi offers to the Celtic side, but also what they also offer when Kyogo Furuhashi is out the Celtic side. Because I mean, Celtic were, in the whole context of things, not doing well in terms of form and picking up results when Furuhashi was out of the team. He came in the team for the game against Leverkusen, which that told its own story that night in question. But you look at 3 days later when they went to Pittodrie, I'll be brutally honest with saying I don't think Celtic will win the game if Furuhashi's not playing that day, because he was probably decisive in terms of the outcome in that game, especially the first goal when he got rid of Aberdeen defence and showed his intelligence and scored home from a close range. They have got good players and they have signed quality players such as your Jotas and Furuhashis, and they're starting to get a little bit accomplished now and accustomed to Scottish football and the way that Scottish football works, and it's only going to be a positive moving forward for Celtic. And I'll be honest by saying if Celtic can continue momentum, which is a big thing in football, they can go and challenge, and there's no question about that. But they just need to keep being professional, such as pick up performances such as the win at Motherwell on Saturday, and if they do that, they'll do well for themselves.
Glenn, Turnbull scored perhaps one of the best goals in the weekend that we saw there. He couldn't celebrate it, unfortunately, because it was against his old side, Motherwell. Perhaps that's another debate for another day. But do you think he's starting to rediscover the form that we saw towards the tail end of last season? Because he was named, Player of the Year. He's worked his way into the Scotland setup. But at the start of the season, it wasn't quite working. He looked almost lost in that midfield under Postecoglou. One week he was the number 10. The next he was the 8. The next he just was nowhere really in the midfield. And he's been criticised a few times for not appearing in the big games for Celtic, but do you think he's starting to finally show once again that form that we know he's got? Because at the end of the day, he's only 22.
Yeah, he's still young. He's probably still finding his feet, and it's an interesting point you make about he's not really maybe found the right role in this Celtic team, and that's probably why he's kind of probably been a scapegoat maybe when things have not gone right for Celtic this season. But he's finding his feet, and I think for him as well, if he can start keeping up that goal tally, popping up with vital goals as he did on Saturday, that'll only endear him further to the Celtic faithful and make him a more pivotal player and harder for Ange to probably drop, if that weren't for the right words. But it's also great to see him continue his form from a Scotland point of view, because midfield, yes, we are very blessed in that position for Scotland, but if he can, get a bit of form, we can maybe push him up further forward. You're looking at that Moldova game coming up in November where, we've got a suspension up top. Do we need someone else that can work off a striker? Well, we've got someone currently in form in David Turnbull. And why not again against Moldova? So I, for one, from an international point of view, hope he keeps up that form that he's currently in.
David, we touched on it when we started to talk about the Celtic result here. Would you say they are back in the title charge now? A team of Celtic's calibre, you always expected to be thereabouts, but the way they started the season, a lot of people had doubts whether they'd even be good enough. And to be honest, even if Celtic were in good form, we've seen how good Rangers can be. It's a very difficult challenge to mount. But with Hearts and Rangers both dropping points, do you think this is the kick that Celtic need to say, yeah, we can definitely compete for the title this season?
Yeah, absolutely. They're only 4 points off the top, and I think if everybody says that Celtic would be 4 points off the top after the barren run they were on, they'd probably bite your hand off right now. But I mean, they've hit the line results from elsewhere, and that's been a good thing. But I think Celtic are horse back also. The fact is that they have had some disappointing results, such as draw with Dundee United and pick up some other disappointing results along the way. But I mean, if Celtic need to balance the two out, they need to balance doing well in domestic form, but they also need to balance out doing well in European form, because European football is massive to Celtic Football Club, and if Celtic aren't serious about that, then serious questions need to be raised both on and off the park, because European football offers so much both financially and also offers so much benefits on the park as well from a Celtic point of view. So they need to balance the two out and manage the two out as well. And if they can manage the two out, I'm confident they can go and do well. This is probably a big season for Celtic when you look at the overall context of things, because I mean, it was a disappointing campaign last year. They want to bounce back in style, and if they can bounce back in style, people still remember what happened last season. No mistake about it. But they'll also look back at things and say, okay, we're back.
Definitely. And just a final point in this game, we should touch on the other team who were involved in this fixture, which was Motherwell. Obviously a 2-0 defeat here, but Glenn, there's still a lot of positives, aren't there, from a Motherwell point of view? They've had a fantastic start to the season, and although they have dropped points against likes of Hibs, Hearts and Celtic, who you'd expect them to, they've held the Rangers, and they've looked pretty good, all things considered, to be honest. I think Graham Alexander's done a good job. Do you think they've got it in them now to bounce back from a result like this? Because we've seen in previous fixtures how good they can be.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. You've got to look at the context of where Motherwell are versus probably where their fans expected them to be at this stage. And I don't know, it's maybe fair to say they're maybe going above expectation levels just now. And yes, okay, they'll be disappointed in the manner of the defeat away at Hearts and, the goals they conceded. And this will have also hurt them. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back or reacted to those two defeats on Saturday at Tannadice, because that's a big game. Going to Tannadice and facing a Dundee United team who are, very much in form just now. And that'll probably be a real test, because, if they were to go into and lose that game, then I suppose maybe some doubt or question marks might start creeping in, such as the fickle nature of football.
Definitely. Well, we'll move on to the Tannadice outfit, because Dundee United picked up a 3-0 victory over Hibs. Probably the most impressive result of the weekend from an individual team's point of view. David, you were at the game. What did you make of Dundee United? Because, to be honest, coming into the season, a lot of people had doubts whether Thomas, I'm not sure how he wants to be referred. I'm going to go with Tom Courts. Is that what he's wanting?
Tom.
Is it Tam? Right,
Tom.
I'll stick with Tam. Yeah, a lot of people were unsure about his appointment, but to be honest, Dundee have been sensational, to be honest, to say the least. What did you make of the performance at the weekend?
Fantastic performance, Stuart. I mean, the opening half an hour, 35 minutes was a little bit tepid, very quiet, not exactly exciting from a neutral point of view. But then once Dundee United got their seeds into the game and got our first goal through Nicky Clark, there was only one team that was going to go and win this game on Saturday. Hibs offered very little answer after that, and the fact that Hibs only had one shot goal across the 90 minutes has got very serious questions for Jack Ross moving forward. And it is a worrying picture. I'll go with the Hibs, and it is a worrying picture from a Hibernian point of view, because that's two defeats. You can maybe understand that the first defeat was against Rangers, but you look at Saturday and one shot goal against a Dundee United side who are very, very good at the back, and they are the fifth meanest defence in Britain right now, which tells you everything you need to know. But they were very disappointed moving forward. Like Boyle didn't get in the ball, other attacking players didn't get didn't get a lot of joy. So it was a very worrying afternoon for Hibernian, and Jack Ross had every right to have a go at his players after the game and have a go at the players in the media as well. He'll just be hoping to get some kind of response at Pittodrie Saturday. But one thing about Dundee United, they're really good in terms of getting the ball into channels and getting balls in areas. I mean, the third goal is very good. They're not exactly selfish. I mean, the ball goes into the byline and then the ball drops to Freeman. The guy, I forgot who it was, he could have had the option to go and score straight away, but what he does, he goes and cuts it back to Freeman, and Freeman has the luxury of tucking that ball away. And that's probably a sign of the togetherness that Dundee United have. There's not exactly a lot of individuals in that team. There's no too many household names in that team either when you look at it. But also, they've got a real good togetherness about them. Tam Court spent a lot of time investing in terms of conversations with players, and it's probably bearing fruition now in terms of the result they got the weekend alongside the results they've picked up against the Glasgow 2 and other results they've picked up and going to beat St Johnstone 1-0 away as well.
Glenn, one thing that we've seen with Dundee United this season, and David alluded to it, their defence has been immaculate, to be honest. Arguably the best defence in the Premiership at the moment. But what they showed against Hibs at the weekend is that they can also score goals. 3 unanswered goals is impressive. Is this another element to the United side that we haven't seen so far? Because a lot of people, we haven't really expected much. When you look at the big results against Rangers, against Dundee in the derby, it was 1-0 victories, as David said as well, against St Johnstone. But now they're showing that they can score more than one goal, and they're pretty good at it.
Yeah, this thing's the first time they've won a game this season in the league that's not been by the 1-0 margin. So, about time they did that, because they won't want to be relying on their laurels, although they're, as Dave there says, one of the meanest defences, certainly in Scotland anyway, if not Britain. But it's great to see that things are starting to click for United. There was always going to be question marks after Lawrence Shankland left, how they were going to replace those goals. Ian Harkes has been filling in so far this season from midfield, and Nicky Clark now adding in as well. But United have got that about them from that midfield, and being able to create opportunities was about taking them on a more regular basis. And unfortunately for Hibs, their defensive frailties continue to show, and Dundee United exploited it ruthlessly, really.
Stu, can I cut in here, please?
Yeah.
Just some news just regarding me and Glenn's favourite team, but predominantly Glenn's. Aberdeen chairman Dave Cormack has accepted an invitation to participate in a discussion about Aberdeen FC and Sportsound tonight. Dave Cormack will then speaking to fans directly with a more in-depth Red TV live interview this week. Dave Cormack says, "I've been keeping my head down to avoid any undue pressure on the manager and the players, but with results still not going our way and having committed to open communication, I owe it to our fans to address the current situation."
That's an interesting one there. For a second there, I thought you were going to say Stephen Glass has been sacked.
So was I.
I thought we were going to get that live on air there, but that's definitely interesting. But remind me to come back to that when we get on to Aberdeen there. That's the very big breaking news. But Dave, I'll come to you for this one for Dundee United, of course. Are they going to be able to get Europe this season? I know we're only 8 games into it, but they've done well against Celtic. They've done well against Rangers. They've dominated Hibs at the weekend. They won the derby as well. They've just looked a really good side so far. And to be honest, if they can keep defending, I see no reason why. It's the classic line of, an attack can win you games, but a defence will win you title. Fair enough. The Dundee United are not going to win the title this season, but that defence could definitely get them to Europe.
Yeah, just to answer the question, defence, the 5th meanest defence in the UK. Chelsea and Man City are the top 2. Cali are 3rd, Tranmere are 4th, and Dundee United are 5th. So it just tells you everything you need to know about how solid Dundee United are at this precise moment in time. But on
the Man City defence has had about 500 million spent on it as well, so it's pretty good company to be in.
Exactly. And Tom Coates won't be getting excited about European football just yet, and understandably so. But when you look at it from a Dundee United point of view, and if they could keep their organisation at the back, I think they'll do just right, because they've got players to come back in. McNulty will be a youth signing when he returns in January. He'll be a while yet. Max Biamu, he came on initially on Saturday for the last 10 minutes, I think it was. Once he gets up to speed in terms of match sharpness, because he hasn't played a lot of football, he'll be up to speed. He had offers elsewhere, but he didn't exactly go down and get any of those offers, and he opted to go for the City of Discovery. Must have heard about Clark's the Bakeries, sorry. But on to Dundee United, and they've got so much potential, and like Ryan Edwards and Charlie Mulgrew, they're very good marshals at the back. I mean, Ryan Edwards is the Liverpool wall. He's a Liverpool wall. I mean, he's very good in terms of scoring goals, as he alluded to at the weekend, but also he's really good with regards to interceptions, blocking shots. He's the perfect example for me. He could play at a far higher level, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I don't think he's ready for England right now. But if you were to ask me next summer, is Ryan Edwards ready for a move to England? I would say he is. And this reminds me a bit about St Johnstone from last year, to an extent. They've got a system, Dundee United, and that system is working for Tam Coates' side. I mean, long gone the days when the Dundee United played at Pittodrie and got beat 2-0. There was a lot of clear air discussions that week in question. They've responded brilliantly. I mean, they've beat Rangers, they drew with Celtic, got a very good win at Dimmock Park against St Johnstone, and then got that win on Saturday against Hibs. And I mean, they deserve every approbation they get following this result in the capital. And the first half felt to spice up, but once Nicky Clark gifted the opener, there was no turning back. And the Scannon, Ilmarin the Scannon's been a very good player for Dundee United. He scored a very good goal on Saturday as well. And he's been really good in terms of getting the ball out wide, but he can also cut in. He reminds me a bit Paul McMillan in a way. And no, it's all positive from Dundee United. And it's another big game. Don't take it one game at a time. It's another big game on Saturday against Motherwell then.
They've said it's all positives for Hibs, but Glenn, I've just read my line there for Dundee United, but Glenn, it's all negatives for Hibs at the moment, and that's back-to-back defeats in the league. Now, a lot of people have mentioned that Hibs' defence has been pretty bad. To be honest, there's been a lot of issues there, but at the other end of the pitch in the attack, it's not been great either. They've said that Boyle wasn't the greatest in this game, and if Martin Boyle's not been playing well, a lot of people have argued this season that Hibs are just Martin Boyle FC. To be honest, if he's not having a good game, then nobody's stepping up. Kevin Nisbet's not started the season the way he left last year. James Scott.
He was poor Saturday, Stuart, sorry.
I think he had about one chance or something like that.
Yeah.
Another poor game. He's not had the same start to the season. I'm not sure what the reason for that is. Jamie Murphy again, another one who's just never quite done it for Hibs. Is that a concern for Hibs? The fact that it's almost giving teams a foil that if you can man mark Martin Boyle out of the game, Hibs have no real threat otherwise, because Josh Doig is a good fullback going forward, but Paul McGinn's not really going to give you much threat down that right hand side. Chris Cadden's done well, but again, he's not exactly a goal threat, you would say, out and out.
Well, I hope Stephen Glass is listening to that last comment ahead of the weekend, that we'll just make sure that we mark Martin Boyle out of the game, and that'll hopefully nullify any other threats you might possess.
just stick Scott Brown on him. Game plan.
Yeah, I think though for Hibs it must be a concern because they've started the season so well, and you look at the result in isolation at Ibrox, given the controversy that surrounded it, but I think the manner of the defeat at the weekend will be most concerning for many Hibs fans, because they don't lose games in that manner under Jack Ross, but the same problems are occurring defensively, conceding balls from balls into the box again. But certainly up front, I don't know whether Nisbet's head's elsewhere and he's thinking of a move to somewhere else. But if you can keep Martin Boyle quiet, then you've got a chance of picking up points against Aberdeen, it seems. And that is concerning, because you would want to have another threat from AN somewhere, whether that's going to be a Scott Allen or Jamie Murphy. But these players aren't stepping up to use your words, in that issue when Boyle is kept quiet, because it will be a concern if Boyle was to get injured or leave in January. Hibs fans, don't shout at me, but it's a possibility. What then for them going forward for the rest of the season?
I don't want to think about that if that happens for the rest of the season. But one final point on this game, I spoke as well about the defence from Hibs. It's not been good, but we saw Nathan Wood make his debut. It's not really a memorable one that we want to think about, because it's obviously a 3-0 defeat, but he's come on loan from Middlesbrough, highly touted. He even captained the England under-20 team in the most recent international break there. David, what did you make of his performance?
Okay.
It's hard to really praise him in a 3-0 defeat, to be honest, but were there anything...
I'll keep this simple and just tell you what Jack Ross told us after the game. He did okay.
Yep, he did okay. Not too bad. Hopefully he will get some more opportunities though, because it's definitely a questionable signing. But we'll
I
come over
still
to
think he'll play Pittodge on Saturday, though. Put it this way, because obviously Portis is suspended.
yeah, Port's still out for that game, yeah. And
So I still think he'll play on Saturday at Pittodge.
yeah, that could be definitely a big game for him to come into, because Aberdeen unfortunately did lose again at the weekend. I think, is it 10 games now without a victory? 10 or 11? 10
Here
without
we
a victory.
go. 10 in a row.
Scott Brown did finally achieve 10 in a row, I've heard, but
Yeah.
it's not been great for Aberdeen at all. But we'll just pick up on the point that Dave raised about 5 minutes ago there. Glenn, what do you make of Cormac coming out and saying he's going to speak to the fans?
It's interesting. Address the issues. While I've recorded Red Tinted Glasses this afternoon, and one of the points in discussion on the episode was about Cormac, very much staying quiet. That episode's not out until tomorrow, so if anyone's away looking for it, you'll be disappointed just now. But it needed to be done. There's been a lot of question marks, and I wasn't at the game on Saturday, but I've not been feeling well over the last few days, so decided to give it a miss. But it was quite audible throughout the second half of the chants that were coming from the away end, that discontent is rising amongst the support. It wasn't just the home fans singing the usual you're getting sacked in the morning. And I think when you're getting that level of animosity from an away end, things are beginning to turn, and whether or not this becomes salvageable. Cormac, he loves himself. He loves being in the media limelight. It's an interesting call coming out and going on live radio to speak to fans in that manner, because the questions won't be vetted by the club beforehand. It's brave. Whether it pays off or not, or puts more pressure on Stephen Glass, will remain to be seen. So I'll be certainly listening in to see what he's got to say for himself.
Dave, do you think this is interesting that Cormac's coming out and defending Glass? Because I think a lot of Aberdeen fans, their opinion is set now on Steve Glass. I don't think many people are really going to change their minds. And there was a similar thing in England coming out. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's under a bit of pressure, and the board have backed him. And on social media, that was met with anger. Even though the board are backing him, the fans are angry. Do you think that's the same case with Stephen Glass? Do you think for a lot of fans, no matter what Cormac says, their opinion is made up? There's nothing he can say. We've heard the classic, the project, something that'll probably be mentioned, etc., etc. But do you think it is possibly too late now for him to make this kind of statement? Do you think it's better for Aberdeen to do their speaking on the field?
I agree, and I also agree with Glenn by saying when he goes and makes the point about Dave Cormac being a media limelight, because I very much agree with that. I mean, when things go stale or things go pitiful or poor for Aberdeen Football Club, it seems to be, let's go out in the media, and let's defend our club to an extent. And I can get why they use the media. I can thoroughly get that, right? But I don't think now's the right time to be using the media. I mean, it's 10 games without a win for Aberdeen, and it is a very worrying picture for Stephen Glass's side. I think he can turn the predicament around. I think he can, but he'll need to get a win as soon as possible, because the pressure's just mounting. I mean, there's a lot of difficult games in there coming up for Aberdeen. They've got Hibs this Saturday, and then they've got, if I'm not mistaken, they've got the Old Firm coming up in the next month or so. And we were speaking about this in the group chat on Saturday evening. You're struggling. You're looking at the list for Aberdeen in terms of the games they have, and you're struggling to look at where they're going to pick up a win between now and probably the start of December, when you look at it in a bigger context.
Definitely. Well, 10 games without a win, to be honest. I think if you're talking about any other team in the Premiership, you'd say that performance is relegation worthy, to be honest. And for a team like Aberdeen, you can't really be having those sort of conversations. Glenn, do you think that is the best way to describe Stephen Glass's form at the moment, that you could question whether or not Aberdeen are, you could question whether they're competing for Europe, but you could just as well question whether they're actually competing against Ross County at the bottom of the table to survive relegation, even though we are only 8 games in, of course.
We're only 8 games into the season, but I was delighted Ross County lost on Saturday, because I knew that it meant if we did, obviously this was before kickoff, but before kickoff, if the worst was to happen, which it had done, we would have still had a 5-point gap to the team at the bottom of the table. We're 8 games in. How are we already looking over our shoulders? But that is the current run of form. It was something I touched on today. Are we, we heard it with Hearts, we heard it with Hibs. These teams are too big to go down, and they both, slept their way into relegation. It's going to be interesting to see what happens from an Aberdeen point of view, I do think though if we are in trouble, so to speak, come the January transfer window, a lot of money will be thrown at the club in a bid to keep us away from the danger zone. But look, it's not nice to be speaking about. I'm used to be speaking about us challenging up the other end of the table, but it's the way the season's gone. It's the mess, if you want to call it that way, we found ourselves in. I kind of agree with what Dave said. I think Glass can get us out this mess. There have been some signs in games this season that things can work out. Unfortunately, the results are not forthcoming, and football ultimately is a results-based business. So, and like I said, ultimately, when the fans have started to turn, if we're not going to get the results in the next 3 to 6 games, I struggle to see where the level of support will remain.
Definitely, I think you summed that up very well there. Although one of our viewers on Facebook is giving some optimism that Aberdeen will win at Rangers. So
well, I hope so. I'm doing a watch along for that, so I really would like something to cheer on for that.
They just may. They'll probably beat Hibs at the weekend, to be honest. But we'll look at the team who actually won this game. David, James McPake's first victory of the season for Dundee. Lee Griffiths, we'll get onto him in a minute. But how important was this for James McPake to finally get that win, and for Dundee in general to finally get going? Because as we saw as well, Ross County were beaten again. This is a perfect opportunity for Dundee to sort of move away, gain a bit of distance away from the relegation zone, perhaps leapfrog Aberdeen.
I think a good one for Jason Pick's side, and Charlie Arden was instrumental in the outcome on Saturday. I mean, it was Dundee's first league win at Aberdeen at Dens Park since 2004, and that just tells you everything you need to know. And Charlie Arden was an instrumental part in that win. And for the first goal, Paul McMillan plays a great ball to Lee Griffiths. There's questions raised regarding Aberdeen defence. I can understand it. But Lee Griffiths, great finish. But the question mark from an Aberdeen point of view, and Glenn probably agreeing with me here, is the fact that Aberdeen defence don't put too much pressure on Griffiths. And then the second goal, I don't know what you think, Glenn, but I think the goalkeeper can maybe do a bit more. What I mean by that is maybe his angles a little bit. McCowan does really well to get into a good area before striking the ball home. But I was having a look today, and I honestly feel that Woods maybe could have covered his area a little bit more.
I think that, the first goal is question marks. Yeah, you're right defensively, but great ball from McMullen. My question mark is that I've only seen a couple of angles on the TV coverage. Sports scene doesn't exactly help, but whether or not Lee Griffiths is on or offside, and does he time his run perfectly? Because certainly on the TV it looked miles offside. And then second goal, question marks potentially over Woods, but for me it's the powder puff challenge in midfield. Ojo loses out to Adam, and we just stand and watch McCowan place the ball into the net. Nobody goes and closes it down. Cheap goal, but it's the story of our season so far. But look, Dundee were impressive. You can't take anything away from them. You've got to capitalise when teams give you chances. Dave, you've watched Dundee plenty of times this season when they haven't taken their chances when they've come up. Unfortunately, they did on Saturday, and look, they got their first win of the season in the end.
Absolutely. And as go back to your point, Stu, it's a big one for James McPake because he was under pressure in this game on Saturday. Not that I agreed with Ben Stretch Imagination. I put up an article on Friday raising the concerns I had because I don't think Jim Keys, John Nelson, Tim Keys, sorry, I got my names wrong there. I don't think John Nelson and Tim Keys would have gotten panicky about this whole situation. I mean, Dundee were playing some good football. They deserved every approbation they got about their style of football, but they just weren't getting results. And I think a lot of the big chat about James McPake was coming based on the fact that St Johnstone was a very lacklustre performance from a Dundee perspective. But I think they tidied the whole thing up on Saturday. And international break could be a very big blessing for Dundee Football Club indeed.
Definitely. We've spoken quite a few times on these shows that Dundee are missing Charlie Adam badly, and Glenn, it just figures that he's back into the team and they pick up a victory, and as soon as Lee Griffiths starts firing as well, it helps that a lot. Do you think Charlie Adam really is going to be that catalyst for Dundee this season, in the sense that if he plays well, the whole team is going to play well, and going forward he's going to be key to making them stay up? Because last season a lot of people tipped him as the reason that they were promoted to the Premiership in the first place. Yeah,
absolutely. Look, I was speaking to a Dundee fan for the podcast last week ahead of the game, and she said that a half-fit Charlie Adam waltzes into their team and, will pull them through. And Charlie Adam pulled the strings in midfield for Dundee at the weekend. He got not only the players around him going, he got the fans going when, the game was maybe going against Dundee slightly in the first half. And it's just you saw earlier in the season the quality he possessed. It the game against Hibs springs to mind, in which he did very well in. But they've obviously missed that in recent weeks. Lee Griffiths is a strange one because I think there's obviously still the doubt on his disciplinary hearing. I think there's still the outcome of that
I think that's still to come.
If he gets away lightly there, then it will be interesting to see if he kicks on. I know he did pick up an injury on Saturday as well, so depending on how long he's now out for, if he is out for a sustained period of time, either through his disciplinary action or injury, you're now looking to Jason Cummings, Killian Sheridan to go and step up and fill that void that he's left behind. But really for Dundee, they're going to want to keep Charlie Adam as fit as possible. They've got a couple of big games coming up, Hearts at the weekend, followed by Ross County as well. And I think, we've spoken about how teams, I remember previously on the State of Scottish Football when Livingston beat Celtic, we spoke about how do Livingston follow up that result? How do Dundee go and follow that up? Because all well and good beating Aberdeen and, giving yourself that cushion, but you've now got to continue that by getting another couple of positive results over your next 2 to 3 games.
I think that's an excellent point, to be honest, because we're just about to come on to Livingston, but as you see, after they did get that victory over against Celtic, they too faced Hearts after and were pretty poor, to be honest. I think Hearts won 3-0 on the day in the end, and they just never were able to kick on. So it's massive that McPake and Dundee do kick on from this result, because it's a good victory. We've seen Lee Griffiths basically was doing what he was brought in for, but as well as you mentioned, his injury, I think that's the second injury he's already picked up during his time at Dundee. And I think coming into that, everybody knew that his fitness record at the moment is just woeful, to be honest. And picking up 2 injuries is definitely going to be a concern that McPake will have to think about. But
although, can I just say, I just hope that McPake, he did find himself getting sent off at the end of the game for a strange sort of incident with Jack McKenzie. I'm not sure, Dave, if you've found out yet, but I'm hoping that Dundee end up appealing that, because I think it was a case of mistaken identity that James McPake saw him get sent off, because it should definitely be either Dave Mackay or Lee Griffiths, because between both of them were the ones that shoved Jack McKenzie quite forcefully to the ground. I think James McPake was trying to break up that incident. So but both him and Gordon Marshall finding themselves sent from the respective dugouts over previous incidents is, I think the referee in question kind of lost a bit of control on the game. So interesting to see kind of the fallout and how that's handled from those 2 incidences in particular.
One thing I noticed on Twitter regarding that sending off, Glenn, is I noticed the head of media at Dundee Football Club said that the referee's report was a little bit inaccurate. He didn't say it was inaccurate, but reading what he said, it was extremely inaccurate, because it was something about McPake chucked the ball and dug out and interfered with play or something like that.
Yeah, it was a very strange one, but just given that we were discussing Robbie Nielsen's red card earlier, I felt right to mention James McPake not being the only man joining Robbie Nielsen and getting sent off this weekend.
It's been a weekend of touchline bans, isn't it? It's been definitely an interesting one. No Diego Simeone in the Premiership, though, unfortunately. I'd love to see how he'd get on. But we'll move on now to Livingston, who hammered St Johnstone. Is that the best way to put it? This was pretty ridiculous. I hadn't been keeping up live with this game. I saw the kickoff, and then I saw the full-time score, and I was a bit stunned, to be honest. I've not been blown away at all by Livingston this season. But Dave, what did you make of Livingston's performance? Because it was fantastic, to be honest, against St Johnstone, who, although are not the same side they were last season and haven't been that great, they're still a decent side. And for a Livy team who are struggling, it's a fantastic performance.
We want everybody to bet responsibly, but God, that was a coupon buster at the weekend from Livingston. A very good result from Davy Martindale's side. 3 goals and a clean sheet at St Johnstone is very uncalled for nowadays, especially for Livingston. You struggle to see an old fan team nowadays going to Perth and picking up a clean sheet and 3 goals. That just tells you everything you need to know about where St Johnstone are at just now. This was after everything went wrong for St Johnstone. We'll get to them in a minute, but as for Livingston, 2 goals from Bruce Anderson. But you look at it from a defensive point of view for St Johnstone, it was a very worrying picture. It was 2 capitulating errors from a St Johnstone point of view. Bruce Anderson has got the freedom of Perth in some aspects just to go and score them goals, and he's not exactly the striker that will go and score loads of goals. He's not a renowned goal scorer for that matter. He has had bits and bobs at the clubs he's been sent out on loan from Aberdeen from, but he's not exactly a renowned goal scorer. But God, he was allowed the freedom of Perth at the weekend, and he won't get a better 90 minutes than what he did on Saturday. He was allowed. He was given a license basically, and that probably allowed Livingston to go and get the result they required. Now, Bruce acknowledged himself that they had an aggressive press, and I thoroughly get that. But also, you're up against the St Johnstone defence that are normally organised. That wasn't the case on Saturday. But I would just pin the blame on the defensive unit at St Johnstone either, because I mean, it was all over the park. I mean, St Johnstone are renowned not for scoring goals, but they're renowned for playing good football, and they very seldom got the opportunity to go and do that on Saturday. But very good result for Livingston. It's a result been coming in some aspects, but you wouldn't have expected it to be this Saturday. But good 3 points all the same, and it's probably going to be a confidence booster. Does it turn the season around? I don't think it does, because we need to see the true complexity of Livingston now. They beat Celtic and never really capitalised on it. They beat St Johnstone Saturday. They've got Ross County away on Saturday. The perfect opportunity to keep a fine run going.
I think you summed that up perfectly there. And Glenn, as David Martindale said, it's not a turning point in the season, but is this the perfect opportunity for Livingston to get a bit of form? Obviously, a win over St Johnstone, they then got bottom of the table, Ross County next. It's the perfect opportunity really to get back-to-back wins. And if they can do that, they can go on from there, kick on. We saw last season, they went on a fantastic run over the winter period across December. They know themselves that if they can get going, they can do it. Is this the beginning sort of a half-decent run that they could get on, or at least to just take a bit of the pressure off the team and ease themselves away from that relegation zone?
Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, this game at the weekend, from an Aberdeen fan point of view. But for Livingston fans, if they can definitely win that game, they create more of a gap and potentially, depending how the results go at Pittodrie, leapfrog Aberdeen as well with a win at Almond Vale at the weekend. But look, we've spoken about this before, me and you, Struan, about how Livingston, back up results, and that'll probably be the message Martindale is saying to the players. It's all well and good recording what was a very impressive victory on Saturday. A tough place to go, as Dave rightly says, but it's how they go and back that up. Odin Bailey grabbing his first goal for the club. Will that give him the confidence to kick on? And Bruce Anderson, I thoroughly agree with what Dave said. He's not an out-and-out goal scorer. I think he's more of a poacher. He knows where the goal is, and if he is kind of like tap-ins maybe, but he's taken his opportunity as well. He'll be a player that will have taken great confidence from his performance on Saturday, and I think that's what Livingston needed: confidence in those forward players and defensively getting a clean sheet. And yeah, I definitely think you're right, Struan. If they can now go and follow that result up with 3 points on Saturday, they'll start looking towards, can they mount another top six challenge?
Definitely. And as you say, this can't just be an isolated result. They need to build on this and go forward. But Dave, looking at St Johnstone, it's interesting you said that we know they've been a good defensive unit. They're lacking that 20-goal a season striker. They've always been lacking that striker, really. But is this a concern now that their strong area and defence is seemingly letting them down?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they played Dundee a few weeks back and won 3-1, and they missed, if I'm not mistaken, they missed McCart because of the Hibs incident. Yeah. And you look at that day and going, is this the potential opportunity for the Johnstone bubble to burst? But it wasn't that day. And we wouldn't have thought that would have been the situation Saturday either, but it appeared to be. And yeah, it's a very worrying picture from a Johnstone point of view. They're never going to hit the heights of last season. Let's put that straight forward. But what we do expect from St Johnstone is to have high standards internally. They want to finish third this season. They're not going to finish third based on results on Saturday. They need to hit a consistent run of games. But these hard games are very much coming, because they've got Celtic at the weekend, then Hearts on Wednesday night, and then Dundee United won't be easy either because of the start they've had. So they've got 3 tricky games coming up, and they need to get a big result soon, or their season could end up being a declining factor instead of a positive factor.
Glenn, as Dave just said there, the fixtures they've got coming up are arguably 3 of the best teams in Scotland at the moment on current form. Coming into this season, St Johnstone wanted to build on what they achieved last year. Obviously, the Cups weren't really attainable to win both of them again, but they wanted a higher league finish, and it could have been an opportunity. But depending on how these next 3 results go, they could find themselves in the relegation zone. Is that where the club are currently heading at the moment?
I don't know. It's difficult, and I think for St Johnstone, looking at the goals that they conceded, calamitous is probably being kind in certainly the second and third goals. Sean Rooney, I noticed, limped off injured after 20 minutes on Saturday. He's been such a key figure to St Johnstone, both defensively and going forward. It'll be interesting to see if any news comes out over the next few days on.
He's out for 4 or 5 weeks, I read today.
Well, there you go. How do St Johnstone cope with, let's be honest, quite a key member of their defence going into this what you both are correct in saying, a really difficult run of fixtures. And look, we all know how easy it is to get cut adrift in the Premiership so far this season because teams are so tightly bunched. So if they go and hit that poor run of form and fail to pick up wins, they'll be like Aberdeen and find themselves looking over their shoulders, going into what a December that is always a busy set period for clubs. So yeah, a tricky few weeks coming up for St Johnstone. Certainly a result that many won't have predicted. And yeah, similar to how Livingston continue from this, how do St Johnstone come in and bounce back? Probably not the game they would have wanted, a trip to Parkhead.
Definitely not. It was definitely the coup and buster of the weekend. But I think the most surprising result of the weekend was potentially in terms of the quality of the football and a watchable game, I would say, from a neutral point of view, was St Mirren beating Ross County 3-2, which pretty good game if anybody's watched that one live. Dave, what did you make of this from St Mirren? Because we're speaking about St Johnstone potentially finding themselves in the relegation zone. Is this St Mirren building their way out of it? They've had quite a few good results recently, all things considered.
I spoke in the Friday show with Jake Gray about the fact that top six played each other and bottom six played each other, and how big a game this was for St Mirren at Ross County the weekend, and a good performance and 3 points is all you can ask for from a St Mirren point of view. It provides pressure in the top six. St Mirren want to be a top six club, and I've alluded to it on this show a few times now that St Mirren came close in all departments last season, just in the sense of the cup semi-finals, then on the last day before the split just failed to make the top six. So it was close but no cigar from St Mirren last season, and they'll want to do everything they possibly can to reach the top six this season, and Saturday will go a long way to achieving that, because Aberdeen, could they respond back? Time will tell. Same with Johnston. So when these so-called bigger teams are slipping up, gives St Mirren that perfect opportunity to build on what they're capable of, but also building the fact that teams are losing and in various predicaments that you wouldn't have been expecting. Nobody would have expected Dundee to beat Aberdeen the weekend, and you wouldn't have expected Livingston obviously beat St Johnstone. So it's, when you take that into consideration, a very good 3 points for Jim Goodwin's side.
Glenn, we spoke earlier on the show about how it was potentially the perfect weekend for Celtic, but was it perhaps the worst possible weekend from Ross County when you think that Livingston picked up a fantastic result, Dundee got their first win of the season as well, and Ross County failed to even get a point out of their game against St Mirren, and now find themselves as the only team, I believe, in the Premiership to still need a win this season?
Yeah, correct, and it's a shame for Ross County that they've got to wait until the 2nd of January to face the team that's helping dish out first wins of the season in Aberdeen. But yeah, you're 100% right. It is probably the worst weekend in terms of results that Ross County could have hoped for. You look at the fixtures probably from a Ross County fan point of view and think St Johnstone should take something off Livingston. Aberdeen, despite the run of form, should be taking something off of Dundee. Both those teams go and get victories, and suddenly you're now a victory behind, being level on points with Dundee, who they do play a week on Wednesday, which is already shaping up to be a very big game for them. But as does the game against Livingston, because Livingston, like you've just touched on there, managed to gain ground on Ross County. So the next two games coming up for Ross County, we say we're only 8 games into the season. Can we be speaking about title contenders, relegation battles? But Ross County cannot afford to come away with 0 points from these next 2 games, or they will find themselves very much cut adrift at the bottom of the table. And I think for those of us that do like an away trip, Ross County would be very much missed as part of the Premiership calendar.
It is quite a distance for most fans to get to. Dave, just the final point on the show here tonight. It's, as we say, we're only 8 games in. It's difficult to say, but do you think Ross County are now that team who a lot of people would say they're the nailed-on team to go down to be relegated this season, because although they still haven't picked up a win and they very easily could do, it's hard to see where it's going to come from. They play well at times, they play well in games, like we saw them going ahead against Hearts, but they failed to close out that game. And again at the weekend, even though they scored 2 goals, they shipped 3.
I'll keep it short and sweet because of time constraints, but I think this next week's the biggest week in Ross County Football Club's season, because they've got Livingston at the weekend and Dundee on Wednesday. Pick 0 points out of 6. It's a very worrying picture for Ross County. I think they are assured to go down this season, but they won't give up without a fight, and neither will Marky Mackay. But I mean, there's a lot not going well at Ross County at this moment in time. Things off the park. It's a very worrying picture. Across Ross County Football Club, and they've only got themselves to blame to a wee extent, because when you look at it, there's been a lot of people that have been against the appointment of Marky Mackay, justifiably so. But then when you consider where they were under John Hughes, fantastic attacking side to Marky Mackay and all the problems and all the baggage that he brings, it is a very worrying picture for Ross County Football Club.
Definitely, and 2 back-to-back relegation 6-pointers. It'll certainly be an interesting week from a Ross County point of view. But I'd just like to thank Glenn and Dave for joining me here tonight. I don't think any other managers have been sent off on the touchline whilst we've been recording this show, but we'll be back again the same time tomorrow, 6 p.m. I hope everybody listens into what Cormac has to say this week, because it'll certainly be interesting. I think would be the best way to put it. But yeah, we'd just like to thank everyone for joining us, and we'll catch you next